The Mediterranean, a sea of legends, beauty, and endless horizons. But beneath its calm surface, tragedy has often struck without warning. The Costa Concordia, a floating palace of steel and glass. She was one of the largest cruise ships ever built, a modern marvel of engineering. Her decks glittered with theaters, pools, restaurants, and lavish lounges. To her passengers, she was not just a ship, she was a dream come true. Longer than 3 football fields, weighing over 114,000 tons, the Concordia dwarfed even the Titanic in size. On January 13, 2012, over 4,200 souls boarded her from the Italian port of Civitavecchia. Their journey promised adventure, romance, and luxury. For some, it was a family holiday. For others, a honeymoon. For many, it was the voyage of a lifetime. As she left port, music filled the air. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed, laughter echoed across her shining decks. But off the coast of Tuscany stood the island of Giglio. Its rocky shores had watched centuries of ships pass safely by. That night, they would claim a victim. On the bridge stood Captain Francesco Schettino, charismatic, confident, and admired. Yet fate would test every decision he made that night. Schettino made a bold choice to steer close to the island in a risky maneuver known as a sail past salute, to impress those on shore. The islanders watched as the massive ship drew closer, its decks glowing like a floating city in the night. But danger was lurking. Just beneath the surface lay jagged granite, sharp, unforgiving, and waiting. The Concordia was heading straight into peril, and no one on board had any idea. Inside, life went on as normal. Passengers enjoyed fine dining, music, and laughter, unaware of what was coming. At 9:45 p.m., the Costa Concordia closed in on Giglio too close, and then disaster. With a thunderous shudder, her steel hull was torn open by the rocks below. Passengers felt the violent tremor. Glass shattered, lights flickered, confusion spread through the dining halls. A 70-meter-long tear ripped open the side of the ship. The sea poured in with unstoppable force. On the bridge, alarms screamed. The crew knew instantly. The ship had suffered catastrophic damage. Then, silence. Darkness engulfed the ship as her power systems collapsed. At first, many thought it was nothing more than a technical glitch, a minor power failure, but soon the fear grew. The once festive atmosphere turned tense. Whispers filled the corridor. Something was terribly wrong. Behind the scenes, crew members scrambled to assess the damage. But the truth was undeniable. The Concordia was sinking. Her engines were already submerged. The heartbeat of the ship was silenced within minutes. But passengers were left in the dark, literally and figuratively. No announcements, no guidance, only confusion. For families with children, the uncertainty was unbearable. Fear began to take hold. On the bridge, Captain Schettino hesitated. Critical minutes slipped away as he tried to downplay the severity of the disaster. Even when contacted by the Italian Coast Guard, Schettino assured them it was only a blackout, nothing more. But the truth could not be hidden. The Concordia began to list, leaning slowly but ominously to one side. Dishes crashed, furniture slid, and passengers realized this was no minor problem. The lifeboats, the only chance of survival, remained unused. Orders from the bridge had not yet been given. Tension boiled over. People demanded to know why weren't they being evacuated. Crew members following protocol told passengers to stay calm, to return to their cabins, advice that would have been deadly. Outside, the Concordia's massive frame leaned harder into the water. Every passing minute meant more danger. What began as a gentle lean was turning into a terrifying tilt. Panic began to spread. The Coast Guard, now alarmed, demanded answers. But still, the full scale of the disaster was not revealed. Finally, over an hour after the impact, the order was given: abandon ship. But for many, it was already too late. Panic erupted. Thousands surged toward lifeboats in chaos and fear. The crew, unprepared for such catastrophe, struggled to deploy lifeboats as the deck tilted beneath their feet. Some lifeboats slammed violently into the ship's hull. Others dangled helplessly above the waves. Survival became a desperate gamble. The decks descended into chaos. Families clung together, desperate to survive as fear turned into raw panic. Some lifeboats reached the sea safely, but with thousands aboard, there were never enough places at once. The elderly, the weak, the injured, each struggled against gravity and fear as the ship leaned harder into the sea. Instructions blared in multiple languages, but in the darkness and terror, few could understand or obey. Every passing minute, the Concordia tilted further. Her once level decks had become dangerous slopes. Meanwhile, rescue vessels raced from shore, drawn by desperate calls for help. Some passengers refused to wait. Terrified, they leapt into the cold Mediterranean waters, gambling with the sea rather than the ship. In the black water, survival meant clinging to anything that floated, while the massive ship loomed above like a dying beast. Helicopters joined the rescue, their beams cutting through the darkness to locate the stranded and the desperate. But as rescuers closed in, one voice was strangely absent: Captain Schettino's. Instead of leading the evacuation, Schettino abandoned the bridge, leaving chaos in his wake. The Coast Guard, realizing the captain had fled, ordered him to return, but their calls were ignored. On board, ordinary passengers and lower-ranking crew became the true leaders, guiding terrified crowds toward survival. Parents clutched children tightly, whispering prayers as lifeboats swung dangerously in the night air. The Concordia now leaned heavily to starboard. Her towering body, once upright and proud, was collapsing into the sea. Rescuers worked tirelessly, hauling survivors from the freezing sea, each life saved against impossible odds. Those still trapped on board cried out into the night, their voices carrying across the waves. From the skies, brave rescuers descended, risking their lives to pull passengers to safety. By midnight, the Costa Concordia was crippled, a leviathan of steel lying helplessly on her side. On the shores of Giglio, the rescued gathered in shock, shivering, grateful, and stunned by the nightmare they had escaped. Inside the Concordia, steel bent and groaned. The ship was dying, her structure collapsing under the weight of the sea. With lifeboats gone, some survivors resorted to climbing down ropes and ladders, descending into darkness and uncertainty. Every move was life or death. A single slip could send someone plunging into the icy waves below. Rescue boats pulled up alongside the giant hull, their crews shouting instructions into the night. By now, the Concordia was almost on her side. Her luxury halls had become deadly chasms of broken glass and flooding water. In a dramatic radio exchange, the Coast Guard demanded answers from the captain.
Get back on board, damn it!
The Coast Guard's fury was clear. A captain had abandoned his ship while thousands still fought for survival. But even as leaders failed, passengers themselves refused to give up, signaling desperately for help. Searchlights swept across the tilted decks, revealing human figures clinging to the very edges of the ship. Firefighters and rescuers climbed the hull itself, risking their lives to reach those stranded above. From above, winches hauled men, women, and children into the sky, a lifeline from the abyss below. By dawn, the Costa Concordia lay crippled on her side, half submerged in the waters of Giglio. The waters around the island were littered with lifeboats, rescue crafts, and debris from the once proud ship. On the island, survivors huddled in shelters. Exhausted, cold, and traumatized, they clung to each other. Rescuers worked tirelessly through the night, crawling through dark corridors to find anyone left alive. Divers descended into the flooded heart of the Concordia, navigating a maze of twisted steel and rising water. Incredibly, some were found alive hours later, trapped in air pockets, miracles amid the tragedy. But for many families, hope turned to despair as the missing failed to return. As the sun rose over Giglio, the world saw the full horror. A cruise liner, once a symbol of luxury, now a graveyard of steel. By morning, the world's media descended on Giglio. The story of the Costa Concordia dominated headlines everywhere. Images of the giant liner lying helpless on her flank shocked millions across the globe. Survivors told stories of panic, darkness, and chaos. Tales of courage and despair in equal measure. Investigators arrived swiftly. Their task: to uncover how a modern cruise liner could suffer such a catastrophic fate. Attention turned quickly to the captain, Francesco Schettino. His decisions that night would make him infamous. Schettino faced charges of manslaughter, negligence, and abandoning his ship. The world watched his trial with outrage and fascination. The damning evidence was clear. His refusal to return to his sinking ship sealed his reputation forever. For the 32 people who never returned, justice was demanded. Their families would never forget the cost of that night. But another challenge loomed: the Concordia herself. At over 114,000 tons, she was the largest passenger ship ever wrecked. An unprecedented salvage operation began, costing billions and involving engineers from around the world. For months, divers and crews worked tirelessly, stabilizing the wreck against the rocks where she lay. Giant platforms were built beneath her, preparing for a maneuver never attempted at this scale. The plan was daring: to rotate the ship upright, a feat of engineering called parbuckling. In 2013, the world watched as the Concordia rose from her side, an extraordinary triumph of human ingenuity. When she finally stood upright, scarred and broken, it was both a victory and a haunting reminder of tragedy. 2 years later, she was towed away from Giglio, a slow funeral procession for a fallen giant. Piece by piece, the Costa Concordia was dismantled, her glittering hulls reduced to twisted steel and rust. Yet, the memory of that night lives on, honored each year by survivors and families of the lost. The sea that once claimed the Concordia has returned to silence, but it has not forgotten. The Costa Concordia, a ship built to symbolize luxury and power, instead became a symbol of human failure and the fragile line between safety and disaster. If you found this video interesting, share your thoughts in the comments and tell me which true story you'd like to see next.